anything else.
We don't want to know.
We're dedicated, yes, to our favorite shows.
Oh, my circuits!
Everybody loves Hypnotoad.
Scary dog!
Blurson at Blurnsville.
Futurama.
Good evening. You are listening to a Radulich Broadcasting Network premiere podcast TV party tonight. I'm your host, the mandated reporter, and frankly, I'm mortified, Mr. Mark Radulich. And tonight, our favorite show is Watchmen. Brought to you by the good people at White Rabbit, Paramount Television, DC Entertainment, Warner Brothers Television, and HBO. Joining me to talk about Watchmen tonight is Alexis Hejna from Honeysuckle Rose Creations. How do you do?
Case custodian y post custodes.
Are you having a stroke of some sort?
No, but my Latin probably sucks. That's the classic phrase, who watches the Watchmen?
It's been since junior high when I last took Latin.
What, you actually took Latin?
I did.
How old are you?
Old enough they were offering it to me. They were offering that class in junior high.
Wow.
Indeed.
See, I only got Spanish, French, and German.
Those are also options, and I did take a little bit of Spanish too, because when I got to high school and I still had to have a language requirement, they were like, well, we're not doing Latin anymore because it's fucking 1994. So I had to take Spanish. Anyway.
I took 2 years of French, but my first year was taught by a literal drunk who came to my class hungover. And when I got to my second year, my teacher basically looked at all of us who were in that class and said, yeah, you're kind of screwed. I don't hold back.
Perfect. Please tell me he was like wearing a beret, a striped shirt, and was drinking wine at the desk.
No, she was 80 years old, had skin that looked like it was made out of the crappiest leather couch in the history of mankind, and wore clothes that would have been out of touch and way too young for a woman 60 years her junior.
I like my version better. When I retell this story, that's who I'm saying taught you. A mime, essentially. A drunken French mime.
Even though it was a drunken, annoying woman.
So, Watchmen is a series that continues the 1987 DC comic series Watchmen, which was, of course, created by Fuck Firestorm, Alan Moore, and Dave Gibbons. The TV series was created by Damon Lindelof for HBO, with Lindelof as the executive producer and writer. Ah, yes, a singular vision. Well, I thought this was a dead concept in 2020, but 2019. But no, there are still people who. Never mind. It's an ensemble.
I would say it's probably important to note that this does take bits from the Watchmen film by Bane to the DC universe, Zack Snyder. But it does mostly revolve around the actual comic. A lot of my friends' family have been asking, if they'd love this, but I have to point out to them, you probably need to brush up on the comic. You don't need to have read it verbatim, but you definitely need to know at least about the switch in the ending.
Yeah.
Spoilers for those who have not seen the Watchmen movie or read the Watchmen comic. We are going to be talking about the infamous squid.
I'll be honest with you. The last time I read Watchmen was when we had Alan Moore Month on the Radulich Broadcasting Network a few years ago, and I had to Google a couple of things because when they actually show the aftermath of the squid, and a lot of the show is a reaction to what happened with that. I was like, "What are they? Oh, that's right, that's in the comic."
So I actually watched a show called Lost in Adaptation, where a British guy talked about the differences between going with the squid and going with what essentially were I'm going to call them power bombs that they used in the movie. I don't think there's really any word for it.
The cast includes Regina King, which some people may know as the HR person from The Big Bang Theory, of most recently. Don Johnson, formerly of Miami Vice. Tim Blake Nelson, Yahya Abdul Mateen II, Andrew Howard, Jacob Mean Trent, Tom Meissen, Sarah Vickers, Dylan Schambing, Louis Gossett Jr., who, again, didn't realize that was even him. And I granted, I know it's 2019 when this came out, but whoo-wee, has Louis gotten old. Jeremy Irons, Gene Smart, and Hong Chow. So this is a continuation, kind of, sort of. They use the word remix. It's technically a sequel. It takes place 34 years after the events of the comic, within that same reality.
So technically current times.
Correct.
Just alternate reality.
Yeah. The series focuses on events surrounding racist violence in Tulsa, Oklahoma in 2019. And we'll get into what this is all about.
I gotta ask you, just because it's the first thing we see in the series, how much were you aware of the Tulsa race riots of 1951?
Aha! I was gonna ask you the very same question. I actually wrote an article about when I used to blog. I don't know if you remember blogs, but they were a thing once upon a time before podcasts.
I hate to say it, but I'm like 99% sure everyone in our age group will claim they used to quote-unquote blog. I think we all did it at one point.
I had a blog. It was called Progressive Conservatism. And because of the college that I went to and then the grad school, and just because of how I've grown up in my life, I became very aware of certain situations throughout history concerning black history in the United States. And history not often talk about, a lot of buried history. One of the things that I was made aware of during my college and grad school years was the bombing of Black Wall Street. And I actually ended up reading a whole bunch of different books about the various race riots around the Midwest in the United States, and how a lot of, there was a whole book that documented and entire towns of black people just wiped out, and then a lot of the reporting just got buried, so it essentially becomes forgotten history. So yes, I was aware of the riots in Black Wall Street and what that was, and I was shocked I tell you, to see it portrayed on television, because again, it's not one of those things that is often talked about. People don't know what the hell. When I've brought it up to people, and when I wrote about it on my blog, I remember there were people who were like, wait, when was this? What happened? It's not a popular subject. Were you aware of it?
Sort of. Again, I've grown up and lived in Kansas City, Missouri, which is sort of technically a southern town. And there's a lot of parts of the Confederacy that we never really learned about in school, just because a lot of them were trying to sort of, sweep it under the rug. I did get into a really interesting conversation with my mom, though, because when she went to school, that was when it was just starting to appear in the history books. And we talked about how just baffling it is that something this horrible was kept hidden for so long. It really is fascinating and disturbing at the same time. You really look at it and you go, wow, it's like to the level that we are willing to go to hide what we are ashamed of.
My understanding of what prompted the Black Wall Street massacre was something alongside of, this was a very well-to-do, thriving commercial area of Oklahoma, and literally on the other side of the tracks was poor white trash, and just moved to anger and jealous of the thriving community the black folks had created in this area. They crossed the tracks and just started burning buildings down and killing people. And in order to contain the riot, the federal government dropped canisters, I think, of oil. I'd have to go back and look at it again. They basically dropped bombs on this entire community.
Let's see here. The riot began over Memorial Day weekend after 19-year-old Dick Rowland, a black shoe shiner, was accused of assaulting Sarah Page, the 17-year-old white elevator operator of the nearby Drexel building. He was taken into custody. The subsequent gathering of angry local whites outside the courthouse where Roland was being held, and the spread of rumors he had been lynched, alarmed the local black population, some of whom arrived at the courthouse armed. Shots were fired, 12 people were killed, 10 white, 2 black. As the news of the death spread throughout the city, mob violence exploded.
Yep. That was a thing. You know, if you're really angry and you're really racist, it's great to just accuse a black person of rape and go from there.
And about 10,000 black people were left homeless, and property damage amounted to more than $1.5 million in real estate and $750,000 in personal property, equivalent to $32.25 million in 2019.
Yep. And not the first time, nor the last, I think, in American history, as I can recall. Well, anyway, that's how the show starts, and it's a very jarring start to the show, but it sets the tone. Essentially, the show is about. Actually, before we get into that, so you're familiar with the Watchmen comic. Let's set the tone here. How familiar are you? When was the last time you read it? What did you think of it when you read it?
It's been a couple of years since I read it. I mostly looked through it when the movie came out because I saw the movie first, but I wanted to read the book afterwards. Admittedly, I did like the movie more at the time because the book, as good as it is, does tend to, I don't want to use the phrase prattle on, but it's like it gets sidetracked, you know? You want to hear about one thing and all of a sudden a side story takes place and you're going, wait, no, I want to go back to the main thing here. We don't need to talk about this, redirect. But that's very much Alan Moore's style. He doesn't just tell a straight story. He weaves multiple stories in through almost a web, if you pardon the incredibly corny dialogue. And I think that's one of the things we love so much about his work. So it was a little harder to get through. And again, I liked the squids, but I understood the change to the power bombs. And looking at the movie that Zack Snyder gave us, the squids would not have worked. But I also understood, I really did like this idea that Ozymandias had at the end, this concept of uniting with our enemies against a common fear. This is something that we see pop up so many times over and over again throughout history that we just keep fighting until the bigger fish appears. Qui-Gon Jinn said it, there's always a bigger fish. It just seems to appear over and over again. I mean, hell, take a look at 9/11 and just at the state of our country, and then all of a sudden 9/11 happens and everyone is holding hands and waving flags and
for about 20 minutes.
Exactly. But this is a constant repeating trend, not just in American history, but in human society as a whole. We constantly fight until we find something bigger to fight against.
So the series revolves around the rising action, and the thing that sets us in motion here is that we have a terrorist group kind of formed in the perceived ideals of Rorschach called the 7th Cavalry. And then we have the police. And in flashbacks, we are told that this 7th Cavalry initiated an attack on police officers on Christmas Eve. This was known as the White Night. It resulted in the deaths and then the subsequent quitting of the several members of the police department, and then those who didn't die walked off. They didn't just attack the police. They got the police officers' personal information. They went to their homes. They attacked their families. So this results in the police wanting to protect their identities. People then rejoin the force. They are able to wear masks, and some of the rank and file police have all standard uniform with a yellow mask, and then some of the detectives and whatnot have superhero names essentially, and their own individual identity masks. So you have Regina King, who is wearing an old black outfit, sort of like a nun's habit. She calls herself Sister Night. And you have, what is Looking Glass? You have a guy wearing almost like a cellophane, like an aluminum foil type mask, who's calling himself Looking Glass, and it kind of goes on from that.
I did find it interesting that in the graphic novel, the mass vigilantes are outlawed, and it's called the Keene Act, named after Senator Joseph Keene. Well, the show gives us Keene's son, Senator Joseph Keene Jr., and he's the one who enacts the Defense of the Police Act,
right,
which allows the cops to, don the mask. Again, there is a very strong theme of just continuously going in circles that this show really goes on, which was, I think, pushed pretty heavily in the original comic.
Yes. Well, the original comic, and Jesse and I talked about this with Doomsday Clock, the original comic speaks to the paranoia and anxiety over mutually assured destruction in the Cold War. This one, which was relevant to when the comic came out.
It's relevant now. We're dating this article, but guess what just happened today, folks?
Prior to that, this one, I mean, if you think about what was going on contemporaneously during the show's development, you had the Black Lives Matter movement. You had, you've had at least since the 2016 election, if not before that, you've had different groups, sometimes pairing off into races, sometimes pairing off into just different ideologies, breaking down into fistfights in the street. Different protests breaking out and then descending into violence at times. And so the show thematically deals with present-day race issues. It also deals with the anxiety of, society dealing with the police. It deals with the anxiety over perceived rise in right-wing fanaticism, etc. And those are the basic concepts of the show. As far as the plots goes, and I'll kind of break this down, and then we can talk about it for a little bit. The thing that kind of gets things going is that we have our cops in masks, our two leads here, Regina King and Don Johnson, and we have our 7th Cavalry. We're all wearing Rorschach masks. And while peace has been maintained, on this particular night, on the way home from a lovely dinner, Don Johnson's character is hung from a tree. And now part of it is, well, who did it? And we'll find out very shortly who did it, but it doesn't make any sense. And there's an even deeper mystery. What was going on behind the scenes with Don Johnson's character that would cause someone to hang him? And that takes the show off and running. Quick couple of things here. There's also kind of a B plot where we meet Jeremy Irons' character, who is the elder Ozymandias, and he's somewhere off, we believe, or are led to believe, in like an English countryside, living in a manor with a bunch of clones as his servants. And eventually we'll meet the Silk Spectre, who has retired the Silk Spectre superhero name and became an FBI agent.
Nice touch of having her reclaim her father's name, so now she's Lori Blake.
Yes. Comedian's still dead. Rorschach still dead. So thought I'd throw that out there. Owlman, not in this.
I think they mention he's in jail. They say something about free your little birdie or something like that.
He wouldn't take the deal they offered Lori, I believe is what happened. Either way, he's not in he's mentioned, but he's not in the show, nor is the owl jet or whatever the hell it was called.
Oh no, we see that at the end.
We see it at the end. And Dr. Manhattan allegedly is still on Mars. So this first bit of the show that kind of gets things going as we meet the characters, because I've heard some, and I want to get your reaction to this, I've heard some people say like these first 3 episodes that deal really specifically with who who and why, who murdered Don Johnson and why, and the fact that they were so focused on race. And one person's comment that this felt like a Watchmen show with none of the Watchmen. Little do they know. It's tough to get. It's tough to get into this show in the first 3 episodes. So tell me what some of your thoughts were with It's Summer and We're Running Out of Ice, martial feats of Comanche horsemanship, and she was killed by space junk.
I definitely get where some of the complaints were. On New Year's Eve, I was discussing this with my friends because, you know, what else are we going to talk about but who's been watching The Mandalorian, The Witcher, and Watchmen lately? I think those 3 series were the main topics of discussion until midnight. And, yeah, I heard at least 2 people say, oh, I stopped watching that after the first episode. They promised Don Johnson and they kill him in the first episode? What the hell? And, yeah, that is a huge curveball. I did not see that coming. For the record, I'm too young to have seen Miami Vice, but I can't see Don Johnson and not think of him in Django Unchained when he's trying to get the bag over his head. He's going, I can't see shit out of this thing. I love that scene. Anybody have another bag? No one brought another bag. So I do get where they're coming from because this is not really the same Watchmen. This continues the idea of not just the Watchmen as the specific team that we came to know in the original comic, but the idea of the Watchmen as a character in and of itself. Who watches the Watchmen? Who are the authority figures that are looking out for us, and who's watching those authority figures? That, I believe, is more what this show was leaning towards. We're not just watching Dr. Manhattan, Laurie Blake, and Ozymandias. Side note, oh my God, Jeremy Irons, perfect as Adrian Veidt. I could not have imagined anyone better in that role.
Yeah, actually, he's really good in this.
Actually, I had no complaints about any of the casting. Hell, I always joke when people say who my favorite part of this. I'm like, Tim Blake Nelson as Looking Glass. I am a huge Tim Blake fan. He is such a good character actor. I love how he just completely disappears into any role he plays. I mean, if you watch this, and then you watch, which was it, Edward Norton's Incredible Hulk, where he's playing, oh my God, what's the name of the scientist character he plays? I'm blanking. Eventually becomes a bad guy.
Oh, you're talking about the leader.
The leader, thank you. Yeah. You put those 2 characters together, they're completely separate.
Oh my God, that's him, isn't it?
Yeah.
I just now realized that. Yeah, wow.
See what I'm talking about? He is such a good actor. I love him.
Boy, has he gotten old in 20 years.
Well, yeah, everyone has.
I was like, Hulk came out in what, 20... Oh, God.
2003, I think? Okay, Wait, was it 2003 or 2009?
I feel like it's been, they say it's 10 years of Marvel movies and it's like 20 Marvel movies. So I'm guessing it was somewhere around 2009, 2010. Here, I'll look it up.
Hey, hang on, I got the DVD here. I need glasses. I can barely read this crap.
2008.
There it is, yeah. Yeah, same actor.
Wow. I did not even realize that initially. That's funny. He's really good in this. But if you would have been like, oh, by the way, he was the leader in the Incredible Hulk from 2008, I'd be like, get the fuck out of here.
I know, that's just how good of an actor he is. I mean, this is the same guy who was in Oh Brother, Where Art Thou?
I have not seen Samuel Stearns, by the way.
Thank you. Too many Marvel villains to keep track.
Yep, I'm looking at a picture of him now. Timothy Blake Nelson. Oh Brother, Where Art Thou? Holes, Syriana, and the Incredible Hulk. Oof. Moving on.
So, this show, unfortunately, does also suffer from a serious case of need to set up itis. There's got to be a better way to phrase that, and if you come up with anything, let me know. But it does take a lot of time to really set up what's going on before we really start delving into it. For example, there is a character called Hooded Justice. Those who have read the original comic or seen the Zack Snyder movie have a passing familiarity with this character. He was a member of the original Minutemen that the comedian in the first Silk Spectre and the first Night Owl joined with. And I guess they made a true life drama about this character that's like a show within the show. Side note, for Mr. I had to watch the third Descendants movie with my daughter, the actor playing the White Hooded Justice is the same actor who played Hades.
Perfect.
I had to look it up. I had to. And I don't know if we really want to go into spoilers here, but...
Yeah, go for it.
Okay, we get a serious retcon where we find out exactly who Hooded Justice was. And it turns out it was Angela's grandfather. The first caped, hooded superhero in this series reality was a black man. And they talk about how much of an impact that had because no one knew. I mean, even to this modern day, everyone else still thinks it was a white dude under the hood.
Yeah, I thought that the series does a fun job of sort of playing with a lot of the things that Alan Moore put in the Watchmen book, and I think Alan Moore definitely had a perspective that he was focusing on, but I also think there's so much in Watchmen for somebody else to come along and say, okay, well, yeah, Alan Moore wants us to focus on this, but this thing over here needs some examination. I'd be curious to see what Alan Moore thought of this if he watched it. If he's comfortable with the idea of let's take the Hooded Justice character and let's do something with that. How about if he's a black guy who's finding that even when he makes all the right moves and decisions, he's still living in a white man's world and he can't find justice, and this is the only way he can reconcile his what he wants to do and his desire for justice with the fact that the world won't let him be a successful black person. And I would imagine Alan Moore looks at that idea and looks at the examining of race relations and says, well, that's a good use for a comic book, so or a television show based on a comic, so I'm okay with it. But then Alan Moore is a fucking weirdo, and he might have just said, what are you doing to my comic book? And might I also add, fuck Firestorm.
Yeah, those of you who aren't familiar with Alan Moore, first of all, shame on you. Secondly, it's widely known amongst comic book fans that Moore has severely been displeased with every adaptation of his work. V for Vendetta, Watchmen, The League. Well, everyone was upset with The League.
In his defense, these were not great movies that they made out of his comics.
No, I'm sorry, I couldn't even finish saying League of Extraordinary Gentlemen. It's like, no, you know what? He had a right to be upset with that. That was crap.
Well, even V for Vendetta, when we talked about that on Alan Moore's month, we talked about the movie utterly misses the point of the book. And Alan Moore is not writing like pop fiction here. He's writing essentially essays in comic book form about the nature of man, and he's examining particular issues, which V for Vendetta completely missed. And then The League of Extraordinary Gentlemen was hot garbage, et cetera, et cetera. So
yeah, no, hell, when the Watchmen movie came out, he refused to have his name on it.
Yeah,
in interviews, he actually acted insulted when Zack Snyder and the others were saying, well, hopefully, one day he'll just turn on his TV and see it and think it's not that bad or anything. And I think his exact words were something to the effect of, I don't watch TV.
We talk a lot about Alan Moore on this network. We love you, Alan. You crazy old bastard. In any case,
you've given us some of the best iterations of comics, and unlike Frank Miller, you haven't completely gone cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs.
So a couple of things about these first 3 episodes. You talked about it's hard if you're sort of a strict comic book person and you're like, where are the Watchmen? It's hard to get into this because they introduce a lot of new characters in the beginning. It's nobody from the book just yet that you know of. You don't realize that Jeremy Irons is Adrian Veidt until much later. I think it's episode 3 is where he reveals what his real name is, and it's not even going to be until much later that you find out where he is and when.
Yeah, I think a lot of people tuned into this if they hadn't seen a lot of the promos, expecting this to be like Tales of the Watchmen. You know, what happened when the team was first formed? You know, what happened when Rorschach and Night Owl first started to team up, when Dr. Manhattan first met Laurie.
Right.
And obviously we're not going to get that. Well,
not only that, but I think people, they heard, oh, there's a Watchmen series coming to HBO, and everyone just went, Rorschach! Who's fucking dead. He got dusted. So, it's the other side of that, and I want to get your reaction to this. Now, I swear to God I'm not baiting you with this question, but I do know you tend to politically swing leftish. So I'm asking you this because I know people, they saw Regina King as the lead and went, fuck this show. Which I had personally had a problem with, because I think Regina King's a hell of an actress, but I think immediately there was a lot of like negative backlash to Watchmen from certain quarters of the television watching populace, because this wasn't A, the traditional superhero show, B, seemingly, little do they know, featuring Watchmen characters, C, 3, P.O.
You couldn't resist, could you?
Starred Regina King, who is a short black woman. So, 1, your thoughts on Regina King. 2, what do you think about people who like wrote the show off immediately once they saw like, oh, there was so much focus on these, 1, her in particular, but these sort of non-Watchmen characters?
First of all, admittedly, I was not that familiar with Regina King before I saw this, but I did enjoy her. I thought she was really good. You get later scenes of her with her husband. I thought it was hilarious that the actor playing her husband is the guy who played Black Manta in Aquaman. He
also plays opposite, oh gosh, what's his face? The guy that plays Falcon. I almost called Falcon by his character name, Sam Wilson. Nope, that's not right either. But those two played opposite each other in an episode of Black Mirror where they go into like a Street Fighter type game and realize that they can have sex with each other, and they do. Fantastic.
No, I really enjoyed her in this, and admittedly, it was a little weird when I started off, when I realized, oh, we're not actually going to get anything about the original characters. But again, we have seen the evolution of superheroes in the original Watchmen comic. We know that these are titles that are handed down through others. And it doesn't take long for you to understand that the idea of the Watchmen isn't the original team. It's saying the Watchmen is, in a way, almost a generic term for superheroes in this reality.
Here's the thing I'll also tell you. This was a weekly show, all 9 episodes of it, that started at the end of October. Started October 20th, and the final show, episode 9, See How They Fly, debuted on December 15th. And people were tuning in because this does not have like super high ratings in the beginning. It's like a 0.7 when it starts. 0.7 million viewers for the first episode, and by the end of it, it had gotten up to 0.9. But here's what I'll tell you. This show is... I don't know if they intended this show to be like one of those, like a bingeable series, which I know is like a marketing thing, but stay with me on this. I feel like there are certain shows where you can watch them as they come out, weekly and wait that week in between, and they leave you with hanging with just enough information that you keep coming back. Then there are others, which I think they're written in a way where if you just kind of watch them as a 8, 9, 10-hour movie, you can appreciate it that much more, and that if you just watched it one episode at a time, you might not come back that second or third week. This is one of those shows where I feel like you need to watch it all at once. Because I feel like if you watch the first episode, you're not getting what the show is totally about. And a lot of those complaints, again, will get resolved as the show gets closer to the end. But you have to give it some time and let it breathe. And it's totally worth it, in my opinion.
I'll give you that. I also binged this. I didn't get a chance to start watching it because, as you mentioned, it started in October, and October through December is one of the busiest seasons for me and my company. I'm on the road like crazy, and we got holiday sales. So I didn't get a chance to pick it up until after the holidays, and I binged the whole thing within 48 hours. And I absolutely loved it.
Would you, if you had been watching it weekly and you'd gotten to episode 2 or 3, would you have kept going based on what you saw in the first 3 episodes, or if you knew, not knowing you had to do a podcast on it at some point, just of your own volition, do you think you'd have finished it or come back for it, or you would have been like, nah, this isn't really worth my time?
I probably would have been not dying to see the next episode, but had I had nothing else going on, I would have watched it. I was intrigued, but not intrigued enough to go, oh my god, shut up, TV! I mean, let's face it, there's a difference between, okay, let's see what's on the tube tonight, and, oh my god, Daenerys just burned down King's Landing.
Yeah, I remember when the last season of Game of Thrones came on, and I would put on Facebook, everyone shut up, Game of Thrones is on.
Yeah, pretty much.
Okay, episodes 4, 5, and 6, our midway chapters here. If you don't like my story, write your own. Little Fear of Lightning, and This Extraordinary Being. So, if you don't like my story, write your own. I'm just going to read this to sort of jog my memory of what happened in this particular episode. Lady True buys out the farmland of an Oklahoma couple just moments before an object from space crashes onto their property to claim its ownership. Angela learns about Will's parents at the Heritage Center when she hears her car crash outside and meets Laurie, finding a pill bottle inside. Later, Angela leaves the pill bottle and Judd's KKK outfit with looking glass and fails to capture an unknown vigilante who witnessed her dispose of Will's wheelchair. Laurie has found Will's fingerprints in Angela's car, as well as a connection to True's facility at the Millennium Clock. True provides them with a list of people with access to the new lightweight drones, and in Vietnamese tells Angela that Will wonders if she got the pill bottle. That evening, True talks to Will about being upfront with Angela, but with events to come to a head in a few days, he would rather she figure it out herself. Meanwhile, Vite collects fetuses from a... This was gross, by the way.
Oh, my God. Side note, I'd just like to add, those who are watching this, be prepared. You're going to see a lot of dick.
Vite collects... Yeah, you do. and might I add, once again, big blue cock.
Nothing. I think actually at one point I shouted, whoa, big black
cock! Meanwhile, Vite collects fetuses from a lake to grow new clones of Phillips and Crookshanks after killing off all the existing ones. With their help, Vite launches the dead bodies by catapult to test the limits of his prison. This stuff with Vite in this episode starts to get really abstract and esoteric and bizarre, and you see where it's going eventually, and it all starts to make sense. But in the beginning, I was like, what is happening with this guy? I don't understand.
Yeah. Again, this is a series that you really have to want to see through the end. They give you a little hint here and there, but for the lack of better words, there is no hook. You know, you will leave confused and you will go, okay, I guess I'm going to find out on next week's episode. But there is no element of, oh my God, I have to know what happened.
Well, this isn't a Monster of the Week thing. This is a long mystery. It's one long story laid out over 9 chapters. And so there's a lot of setup. There's a lot of things being kind of stitched about through the narrative that then get resolved later. Like, the last 2 episodes, 8 and 9, pretty much resolve just about everything set up in the show. And they're still setting stuff up even as you get to episode 7. So it's like, it's a lot of breadcrumbs that you have to be aware of and paying attention to.
Side note, refresh my memory. The thing that fell on the farm, was that the rocket from Europa?
I believe it was.
Okay, because I hate to say it, until you brought that up, I had completely forgotten about that, except for the hilarious bit where she says, it's like, you have 30 seconds to make up your mind before I destroy the baby. I'm joking.
We'll find it a nice home.
I'd like to add, was I the only one that shouted, "You bastard," at the woman who incinerated the clone puppy?
Probably weren't the only one, no.
Yeah, I think that's a tie between me shouting at that and shouting at the stormtrooper who punched Baby Yoda. What's worse, America? Incinerating a clone puppy or punching Baby Yoda?
You decide. Election 2020. Our next episode, Little Fear of Lightning. Wade suffers PTSD as a survivor of Veidt's 1985 squid attack. Laurie bugs Wade's desk and learns that Angela has asked him about the pills. The pills are nostalgia, by the way. They essentially will allow you to relive your own memories. She's got Judd's memory pills, his nostalgia, which she will eventually take.
I'll say, anyone else get a serious Aeon Flux feel from those pills?
Maybe, if I had paid any attention to what Aeon Flux was. Wade's ex-wife Cynthia tells him the pills are nostalgia, which contain other people's memories. The cavalry lure Wade to a warehouse where they are testing a teleportation portal. Joe explains both he and Judd are cavalry members trying to keep them in check. Joe coerces Wade's help to learn what Angela knows about Judd's death after showing him a video of Veidt made a day before the 1985 attack, an address to the future President Redford, explaining his long-term plan.
That's right, ladies and gentlemen. Robert Redford is president in this universe.
An actor? All right, I don't even remember the whole Christopher Lloyd bit from Back to the Future. I just remember, an actor? So yes, apparently, the whole squid thing was a bunch of bullshit, which we all already knew. Shaking Wade to his core. At the station the next day, Wade gets Angela to state that the grandfather was behind Judd's death. Laurie hears this via the audio bug and arrests Angela, but not before she ingests the pills. Wade returns home after work, and the cavalry members arrive with guns. It is revealed that Veidt's prison is on Europa, and arranges the frozen bodies of his servants to spell out "Save me," so they would be visible to a passing space probe. However, he is pulled back into the prison and arrested by the game warden. And then 6 is the big flashback episode where we get the entire back history of Hooded Justice, who turns out to be Louis Gossett Jr.'s character.
And that episode is, going without a doubt, is my all-time favorite. The technical aspect is brilliant. We cut through multiple times of Judd's character being replaced with Angela as she is reliving these memories. A lot of these are done in single takes, so you can tell that the actors are essentially jumping in and out of camera within frames. We have moments of color blending in with black and white as the memories start to overlap. And 90% of the whole episode is black and white, and it is just beautifully done.
So what did you think of this middle section here? Episodes 4, 5, and 6. Still a lot of setup. They're moving the stories along. I feel like in this middle section here, we're getting a lot of information. We're moving the plot forward, but they're not quite ready to pull the trigger on a lot of reveals, especially in 4 and 5. 6 is where I think the show starts to shift into, and then there are 3 more episodes after this, so this would make sense. But 6 works not only as serving as backstory to get the audience caught up to speed with how we got to the point where Louis Gossett Jr. is inserting himself into Regina King and Don Johnson's life, but also I mean, if you need an episode that kind of takes you back to the beginning and reminds you this is and very much about, like I said, the anxiety of poor race relations in this country, and and the history, and there's a lot of what it's like to be a black person in this country, both historically and in present day, which I think is important. I also think for a lot of audience members that might be off-putting, but I really enjoyed it, and I like the examination through this lens of race relations. The one thing, and it didn't bother me, I want to be clear about this. This isn't a complaint. But it did produce kind of an eye roll moment for me, just because I feel like, I don't know if the show needed this particular detail, and that this almost smacked of, well, we need to throw this in there too. We need to make sure this agenda is dealt with. Not only is Hooded Justice a put-upon black fellow trying to figure things out, in the 40s and 50s America where life was rougher, free black men, but he's also gay. Like, closeted gay.
At least bisexual. I mean, he is married, he does father a son.
Yeah, at least. And I'm like, maybe you have a different take on it. I just didn't know what the point of that was, and why, on top of everything else we were getting, that needed to be a thing too.
Well, firstly, Hooded Justice being gay was actually alluded to in the original comic book. Mm-hmm. That's nothing new.
Okay.
It was hinted. I'm trying to remember if it was ever explicitly said that he was in a relationship with Captain Metropolis, or if it was just hinted. I know there was a line in the movie when he breaks up the attempted rape of Silk Spectre, and the comedian says something like, "This gets you off, you pervert," or something, and Hooded Justice is like, "Oh, how dare you," and punches the shit out of him.
And I know one of the things in this show is they have a kind of a meta show within a show thing going on. And so during all of this is this television special about the history of the Watchmen. And
that's what I was talking about with the actor who played Hades.
They have a white Hooded Justice having sex with Captain Metropolis. So, if that's all it is, fine. But go on.
Well, another part of it comes down to the scene where Hooded Justice Judd finds out about not the 7th Cavalry, but this racist plan to essentially hypnotize theaters of black audiences into turning on one another and beating the crap out of them. So that way white policemen can simply say, you put all the animals in a room, look what happens. The first thing he does is he calls Captain Metropolis and asks for help. And Captain Metropolis talks down to him in the most just pretentious way possible.
Condescending is the word you're looking for.
Condescending, thank you. That's the word I was looking for. And it's just like, oh, it's okay. Now, why don't you come over? I'd really love to see you. And it just dawned to you, it's not simply just that it's a racist thing, but even though Captain Metropolis claims to love Hooded Justice, even then, he still doesn't take him seriously, because even though he claims to love him, he still sees him as it's like, I'm white, you're black,
Captain Metropolis doesn't love Hooded Justice. He just loves his doggy style.
Sure, why not?
Go on.
No, I felt that was actually a really important scene, because he realizes that all the time we get so many scenes of Captain Metropolis talking up Hooded Justice. He says that he's the one that inspired the Minutemen, the Comedian, the First Night Owl, Silk Spectre. I don't know if Hooded Justice was the first one who came in the comics, or if this was retconned, but he was supposedly the great inspiration. Think of it like Superman in Justice League, and that he was the inspiration for Wonder Woman and Batman and all the rest of them. Again, I know he's not, but you kind of look at it like that. And for him to hear that this man that he was sleeping with, who kept saying, you're my inspiration, you're the reason I'm a superhero, and I love you, and I love you as a person, to basically say, oh, I don't care what you're saying. It really shifts the context and just kind of puts everything back into a horrible perspective. You realize that no matter what he's done, how hard he's fought, and who he's inspired, they still just see him as less than them because he's a minority.
They love him when he's useful.
Mm-hmm.
Which is a common thing among yesteryear, maybe even to a degree, present day, really any minorities, but we're talking about African Americans here. Pat and I just did a whole thing on Joe Louis, and one of the things we talked about was, hey, if you want to get white people to love you and accept you, not treat you the way they treated Jack Johnson, make sure you don't go cavorting with white women in public. Don't be seen doing stereotypical things. Always maintain your composure and don't embarrass yourself because that's the only way to get white people to accept you. And so he had to be well behaved in public, and then he got in the ring and just fucking murdered guys left and right. But that's what they're talking about here is while Hooded Justice was useful, sure, he was well loved and he was taken care of, but when he's, but there was nothing to be gained by taking out Cyclops from the white perspective. And therefore, there's no sense of urgency, and certainly they don't, he didn't care that this was important to him. This was a one-way relationship in which Hooded Justice was useful to the Minutemen and Captain Metropolis, which is an ongoing thing. That is a theme throughout the history of, in this particular case, African Americans in this country.
See, I disagree a little bit. It wasn't so much that he was useful. I think of it more that they were just looking down on him. Think about how many times your kids have run into the living room saying, oh my God, it's a disaster, blah, blah, blah. And you and your wife were, yeah, honey, we'll get to it in a minute.
Mm-hmm. I mean, yeah, sure. I think by virtue of just his race, there's there's that bit of being condescending. But he outright says that you lend, what's the word credibility. Your presence lends credibility to the Minutemen. That's what I'm drawing from.
Yeah, but not because he's a minority, because he was the first.
Okay.
We should have had that Judd paints his face underneath the mask. That's why no one can tell that he's a black guy. So.
Well, that's all fair. So, as we move into 7, 8, and 9, our concluding chapters here, this last arc, we have 7 that we get a lot of reveals in 7. We get a lot of what everyone's after, what this all has to do with Dr. Manhattan, where is Dr. Manhattan, and we'll find out that he's been hiding in plain sight on Earth this entire time. He was not on Mars. We have the 7th Cavalry's plan is to capture Dr. Manhattan. We have Lady True's plan to become Dr. Manhattan, essentially, and do the things that he refused to do. I think that all gets revealed in this episode to one degree or another.
The show does switch around and keep you guessing on who the actual bad guy is. I did not see it going with Senator King Jr. becoming a bad guy. I kind of hinted, I had a feeling it was Lady True, but again, you don't see her master plan coming. They really do a good job of surprising you with, who actually is doing what. I want to add, though, that after Senator King Jr.'s incredibly annoying speech, I would have killed for a scene of him freaking out before he suddenly turned into Liquid Schwartz.
Then we get episode 8, which is my favorite one of the whole series. This whole thing is told. It's the it's the two characters sitting at a table talking episode. But you get a lot of flashback. And, okay, it's revealed in the previous episode that Angela's husband is actually Dr. Manhattan. And he is, he's basically got a gizmo inside of his head that made him forget that he had powers. And he's been just living his life as a regular human being. And she's just kept that secret to herself. But everyone's after Dr. Manhattan now. He's suddenly become the MacGuffin. So she has to wake him up and remind him of who he is. And so while that's happening, we get a flashback as to how we got to that particular place in time. We're living in the state of Vietnam at this point, and Dr. Manhattan walks into the bar. He sees Angela sitting there, and because Dr. Manhattan, such as he is, exists in all time and all space, he's able to talk about things that have not happened yet, but will happen with the degree of assurity. And through the course of several interactions and things said and whatnot, they end up falling in love, and that's what leads to this plan of him taking on this persona, putting this gizmo in his head to block his memories, and hiding in plain sight. And they are married, and they are living together, and they have a number of great years before all of this shit breaks loose. I loved this episode. I was raving about this to people. I thought, the actor who plays Dr. Manhattan, I'm going to pull up his name real quick.
Not Dr. Manhattan as in the husband. Dr. Manhattan is in what we see of the blue guy.
Yeah. Yahya Abdul-Mateen II. He is so good. Like, I didn't realize how good of an actor he was, but now I've seen him in a couple of different things. Like, wow, he's got quite the range. This guy does. But I thought he had a lot of charisma. I thought him and Regina King had a lot of chemistry together, and I was really enraptured by their give and take. And while some of the way that he talks could cause you to have a nosebleed, I thought they did a good job of keeping it relatively straightforward enough that you could still follow it while still making it interesting and kind of abstract. I love the use of flashback in this. I just thought, given what we're going to get in the next episode and what we got in the previous one, excuse me, I thought this was a great kind of timeout. Let the series breathe a minute and kind of just show you how we got to this one previous moment where she's whacking him in the head with a hammer. I just thought it was amazing. Tell me...
as you do, as a woman does to her husband.
Yes. Tell me you love this episode. You'll break my heart if you don't. If you didn't like this episode as much as I did, I don't know if I can live with myself.
No, I did love it. One of the things I love so much about it is it's been established in pretty much every version of the Watchmen how Dr. Manhattan perceives time. It is not linear for him. He perceives all time at the same time. He is constantly living every moment over and over again. It's very hard to explain, but again, it's not just I'm in this moment. It is I am also in that moment and in this one and in that one as well. And the show does a brilliant job of cutting forth through these flashbacks, essentially establishing where Dr. Manhattan is at every moment and how it all ties back. I love the scene where Angela says, you've got one hell of an imagination, and he laughs. And she says, what? And he goes, it's nothing. And then you later find out that he is experiencing a similar time when he's talking to Adrian Veidt, and Veidt says, you have no imagination. And he's laughing at both of them because he's having both conversations occurring to him at the same time. It's really genius.
Yeah, this was brilliantly written. Another thing, excuse me, another thing that had me, reacting and just oh my god, that's amazing. And I'll just read this. At Veidt's request, Manhattan transported him to Europa and also visited Will, Louis Gossett Jr.'s character, to encourage him to help Angela in 2019. Angela, speaking to Manhattan in 2019, asked him to ask Will in 2009 how he knew of Judd's secrets, Don Johnson, but realizes she gave that idea to Will just now. When Louis Gossett Jr. says, "Who's Judd?" and she realizes that she started the causality loop that got him to use the mind control flashing bit, to get Judd to hang himself. I was like, damn, that's good writing.
As I said earlier in this review, one of the great themes of the Watchmen in whole is that we are constantly moving in circles. The same shit will happen to us over and over and over again. And that causality loop is a prime example. We cause our own suffering.
I thought that was just flippin' brilliant. And if I was kind of on the fence about the show up to that point, this episode totally sold me on it. And I became a huge fan after this. Like, I was raving to people about this episode.
I'd like to add, I found on Etsy, somebody actually made a necklace that resembles the gizmo that gets put in Dr. Manhattan's head. And I want it!
Well, of course they did.
No, it kills me because I actually showed it to Andre and he looks at me and goes, "Can you make it?" And I'm just like, "Yeah, I can. But I just want to buy it. Can't I just buy it?" That's the hard thing about being a jewelry maker. So I'm just like, yeah, I can make it. But you know what? I'd rather just skip the headache and just whip out my credit card.
So, I'm not alone here. And this is the only one I've read, but I think it's worth reading. A God Walks Into a Bar received universal critical acclaim. Rotten Tomatoes, the episode has an approval rating of 100%, with an average score of 9.25 out of 10 based on 23 reviews. The site's critical consensus reads, Watchmen seamlessly begins to tie up loose ends, but Regina King and Yahya Abdul-Mateen II's exceptional performances make A God Walks Into a Bar a surprisingly beautiful and profoundly tragic love story. This is my kind of romance.
And of course, there's Big Black Dick.
Oh, big black dick, big blue dick, all kinds of dick. Dick.
Seriously, folks, it's like there's a decent amount of nudity in this, and 90% of it is dick.
I haven't seen this much cock since Oz.
Go play Genital Joust, then we'll talk.
What?
I'm serious as a heart attack. There's a video game called Genital Joust, and my friend showed me the Let's Play on New Year's Eve, and there is no amount of eye bleach that can possibly exist in this universe to eradicate that shit from my head.
Okay, then. All right, our final episode is See How They Fly, and this is our our conclusion. This wraps everything up. Again, you have the 7th Cavalry who are trying, everyone wants to be Dr. Manhattan. Keene Jr. wants to be Dr. Manhattan, but he wants to make everybody Dr. Manhattan. And he has a great line. We haven't talked a lot about it in this podcast about the 7th Cavalry. And basically, like I said, they are a right-wing terror group. There's not really a whole lot to discuss here. But Keene has a great line. He's like, and again, they're writing from the perspective of what's current, what are we wrestling with, and I don't want to get into a whole political discussion about it. That's not the point of the podcast. But there is this undercurrent of anger in certain sections of the white community in America, and the phrase "it's hard to be a white man in America," while laughable, is something that is certainly believed by enough people that we win national elections based on it. So, it's a thing.
It's believable enough that somebody actually made the movie Loquisha last year.
It's a thing. It's out there. We're dealing with it. And so when Keene says it's so hard to be a white man in America, I'm going to try being blue now. This is about that feeling of feeling, rightly or wrongly, disempowered and trying to take that power back, which is certainly what contemporary politics is about right now. At least part of it. So there's that. Then you have this idea of wasted potential, wasted promise. You have Lady True, who is Veight's daughter, whether he realizes it or not. And she looks at Dr. Manhattan and she says, here's a guy who, after what happened after he won the Vietnam War, had all of this potential to save the world and instead turned his back on humanity. Well, he doesn't deserve that power. I deserve that power. So I'm going to take it, and I'm going to do all the things he should have done. So that's her thing.
But
and
of
then,
course, we get the great line from Vide about how anyone who thinks they deserve that kind of power does not deserve that kind of power.
that is correct. I believe also George Washington said the same thing. Anyone who wants to be president should not be president. And so, just kind of getting to the end here. Lady True shows up. She wipes out the entire 7th Cavalry because they're a bunch of racists. And that's
I
done.
do love that Judd's wife is, I almost said Judd Nelson. Judd's wife is there, and she's like, oh, get over it. You're going to kill us, right? And she goes, yeah. And I just love Lady True's surprised reaction. She's like, well, I wanted to go through the whole speech, but if you just want to die, sure.
Right, and just wipes everybody out. It was kind of like my favorite bit of a conclusion since Doom Patrols, and now we get to the punchy part. Because it does turn that particular comic book trope, that fiction trope, on its head. You know, the bombastic, monologuing villain and all of that. It's just like, no one wants to hear your horse shit. Just kill us. Okie dokie.
Yeah, what do we call it in the My Little Pony circles? She got twilighted off her soapbox.
And so she's got a machine there. They've got Dr. Manhattan in a cage. She's going to transfer his power to her, which is the same plan that the 7th Cavalry had, but apparently they did not have all the science down. She does because she's a super genius. She's Wile E. Coyote.
And something about you need to filter the radiation or something.
It was science gobbledygook. Who gives a shit?
Go ask Donatello of the Ninja Turtles.
So in the last, by the way, by this point, Lady True has saved her father. She got the message. She sent the craft to him. He got flown through space back to Earth, and realizing what's happening and who belongs to what and how they got there, says this is probably a bad idea. So he helps.
By the way, how freaky was it about the golden statue reveal?
Yeah.
That legit freaked me out.
He helps our heroes come up with a plan to stop the transfer of power from happening by using his squid rain bit, where they're all frozen and they're killing everybody, and it destroys the machine and it kills her and it saves Dr. Manhattan. And I forget, refresh my memory, what? I'll just read it. Angela takes shelter in the theater where Will and the children are, where Will explains Manhattan. Nope, let me go back.
I'll say that's for the record. Same theater this whole thing began in. That was the theater that Will's father was sitting in. Or no, young Will was sitting in during the 1921 Tulsa race riots. Again, full circle.
Okay, so Manhattan allegedly dies during this whole thing.
We're going to have to wait till the next season to find out for certain.
Well, we'll talk about that in a moment. But Manhattan is gone. True is gone. Everybody's gone. And squids have taken out lots of people.
Yeah, we find out that to help further push the idea that the squids are attacking Earth, Adrian Veidt has been essentially raining infantile baby squids in various spots around the world. And they usually do no damage, and I think he says they disintegrate pretty quickly.
Yeah.
But that's because they land when they're moist and juicy.
Yes.
But if you freeze them before they land, then it's essentially like getting the world's biggest chunks of hail. So, yeah, Manhattan teleports him, Looking Glass, and Lori to Veidt's compound, where he's been doing this in Antarctica. And Veidt gets the idea, freeze them, and then we'll send them to Tulsa. And I love the scene when the first one hits, and it hits Lady True in the hand, and she looks down, she's got that hole in her hand, and she's just got the most WTF look on her face. Lori calls. Oh, we find this is hilarious. There's all these phone booths around the world that are supposedly linked where you can call and leave a message for Dr. Manhattan. But we find out that Lady True purposely planted those. And because she knows, essentially just kind of create a false hope for people because she knows that Dr. Manhattan's not on Mars. And this whole thing takes place, again, outside the theater, but there's one of those phone booths there. And Angela and Lady True's daughter, who is also her mother, and there's a mind fuck I don't think we have time to discuss, managed to jump into that phone booth to take cover before Angela manages to make it to the theater alive.
So all in all, True's gone, like I said. Manhattan's gone. Will explains to Angela that he worked with Manhattan to bring about the necessary conclusion to all of this. Laurie and Wade, who are in Antarctica now, bring Veidt to justice for killing millions of people in 1985. And then lastly, and there was a bit where they talk about Manhattan transferring his powers to people, and there's, you know, it's like, what if you put it in an egg, and then I ate that egg, which actually happens.
Tell me I'm not the only one that got all squeamish when she ate the raw egg.
Well, I've seen Rocky movies. It didn't bother me.
I hated that scene of the raw egg movie. Raw eggs are gross.
Yes, ma'am. So she finds one unbroken egg. She eats it, and we see her attempting to walk on water. She never quite makes it before the scene cuts. Her foot's kind of extended over the pool, and maybe she's Dr. Manhattan, maybe she's not. We don't know. So, all in all, a superior season of television. Let's start right there. Let's get that right, as Gordon Ramsay would say. This is the best show I've seen in 2019. I know we're all going to talk about The Mandalorian next week, and I'm going to get told by a bunch of Star Wars nerds that that's the best show, but you're wrong. It's The Watchmen. Right?
I still say, what was the biggest insult? Incinerating a clone puppy or punching Baby Yoda?
I thought this was some of the most well-written television, at least of the stuff that I've seen all year, and I couldn't wait to talk about it. This is something I would probably watch again. I really enjoyed it that much. If nothing else, I'd watch episode 8 again. So, give me your 50 words or less, and then let's talk about what the future holds for our Watchmen series. 50 words, your sum up.
Again, this show's got a real slow start. You have to want to get into it, because they have a lot of ground that they've got to cover before we can actually get into connections with the past Watchmen series, which I believe is what more people wanted when they first tuned into the show. But we do get that. The writing is brilliant. These are all incredible actors. I mean, how much time did we waste just talking about Tim Blake Nelson and Jeremy Irons? And I absolutely enjoyed it. Again, though, I would recommend, if you have seen the Zack Snyder film but you haven't read the comic, you don't have to read the whole comic because it's hard to get through. It's a very, very long, very intricate, very, what's the word I'm looking for, when it just kind of meanders on in other directions.
You're asking me for another word for meandering?
Well, it's a meandering book. So if you don't want to read the book, that's fine, but do yourself a favor and at least brush up on the original ending of the Watchmen book so you can be a little bit more familiar with the psychic squids. It will help you in the long run.
I got to read you a couple of things here, okay? As we get to the end of this. Rotten Tomatoes audience scores is markedly lower than the critics' consensus, with several news outlets reporting that the site was review bombed.
Okay, I'm sorry. At this point, can we just please make Rotten Tomatoes solely professional critics? Because I am so tired of this review bomb shit.
Esquire writer Matt Miller wrote that the far-right trolls, quote-unquote, have artificially deflated the audience score. These outlets agree the chief complaint among followers of the source material is that the image of fan favorite Rorschach is adopted by the 7th Cavalry, a white supremacist organization. Many fans have agreed with the television series' use of Rorschach's image as an element in right-wing politics, citing Alan Moore's intention to use Rorschach to comment on what characters like Batman would be like in real life. Other fans have claimed that the show should conform to their interpretation of Rorschach as a straightforward hero. And there, folks, is the reason why I was screaming at the top of my lungs on our Rise of Skywalker review. That's it right there. By the way, we also had this very same discussion when we talked about Fight Club. Jesse and I, and then to a degree, I think Sean and I both talked about the fact that you have these artists that put a character out in the world that's supposed to represent something very negative, but people utterly misinterpret that character and run in a different direction with it, leaving the author, the artist, to wonder, what in the hell are we doing here? And to that
extent, so I would say, did somebody get upset about the term snowflake?
And to that extent, I need to read these last two quotes here, because this to me sums up the whole thing, and then we'll talk about where this is all going. From Alan Moore, regarding Rorschach's reception. I wanted to make this like, yeah, this is what Batman would be like in the real world. But I had forgotten that actually a lot of comic fans, that smelling, not having a girlfriend, these are actually kind of heroic. So actually, sort of, Rorschach became the most popular character in Watchmen. I meant him to be a bad example, but I have people coming up to me in the street saying, I am Rorschach. This is my story. And I'll be thinking, yeah, great. Can you just keep away from me and never come anywhere near me again for as long as I live? And might I also add, fuck Firestorm?
You're never going to stop saying that, are you?
No, I long for the day that I can go to a con and set up a Radulich broadcasting booth with T-shirts, and one of those T-shirts is just going to be a black T-shirt, red lettering, and it just says "Fuck Firestorm," F-O-O-K, Fuck Firestorm.
As long as we also get a T-shirt that says "All Hail the Mouse."
Sure. Now here's Damon Lindelof. Okay, I love Rorschach. I loved him as a 13-year-old, and I still love him. When you see the tears streaming down his face when his mask is pulled off, one of the cops is saying, "This little runt is wearing lifts." It just breaks my heart every time. I have such empathy and compassion for this guy who's losing. The world is sickening, and there's nothing he can do to stop it. So yeah, a lot of people brush the series off because it didn't conform to their interpretation of what Watchmen was and what these characters are. And sometimes there are just certain people, at least in this country, who just don't deserve good television. That being said,
there's certain people in the world who don't deserve media as a whole.
Yes, I often dream of a world where people can't get on Twitter anymore. But anyway,
Jesus, yeah. Like I said, under protest on Twitter.
So this was not meant to be an ongoing thing. This was supposed to be sort of a self-contained story, 9 episodes, hit it and quit it, one and done. So let me first throw that at you. Do you think this works as just a kind of television event, 9 episodes, and let's never speak of the shortcut again? Or are you kind of disappointed that this wasn't meant to be an ongoing, it could end at any time type series?
It has a really great conclusion, and if there is no other series after this, I will say well done and walk away. If we do get a second season, I will cheer and say awesome, I can't wait to see what happens next. There are certain things where you want to see what happens more, but you have to respect that they do a good enough ending that if you leave it as is, you'll be at peace. Think of when the multiple times Futurama tried to end, and they actually did a good job of giving us some pretty decent non-cliffhanger episodes.
I, for one, don't need to see another season of this. I feel like further seasons of this particular show with this set of characters can only get worse. Having said that, there is talk that this did well enough that they might do a second season. But I think what David Lindelof has said is, if they do a second season, they're going to start over with a different story. So it'd be more like True Detective. I don't know if you're familiar with the show or not. It'd be more of an anthology series, or like American Horror Story. Another good example. A show I don't watch, by the way. But it's not a continuing, ongoing story like The Wire or The Shield or, some of the more just ongoing, Game of Thrones. That they told this story, it's over. If they do a second season of The Watchmen, they'll start a whole new story with new characters doing a different thing. Like, I don't want an answer to, did she become Dr. Manhattan? I really don't. I'm good with the ambiguous ending. I think leaving things to people, I think that's the problem with a lot of fiction in the modern times right now, is that because of the need to create new media, things get overdone and too spelled out and not left to the imagination. And I think that robs us of the ability to just interpret things. And so I kind of just want it to stay ambiguous. You see what I'm saying? I don't know if you agree or not, but do you at least understand what I'm talking about?
Yeah. Again, if they decide not to do a second season, I am content with the ending. I think, honestly, the only thing that I wanted a little more conclusion on was what happens in Night Owl. But that's just more because he was my favorite character from the original book.
I have an idea, now that you say that. What if we get a second season that just focuses on Night Owl, but he's in Oz? Eh?
What do you mean he's in Oz?
The prison show.
Oh, good Lord.
There it is. That's what I was looking for.
We can't go a show without Mark breaking me, ladies and gentlemen.
All right.
Next question. We talked about this briefly online, and I mentioned that I wanted to discuss it.
Okay.
There is a lot of as you mentioned, there's a lot of talk about the 7th Cavalry adopting the Rorschach mask, when a lot of people feel that this wasn't the way the character was written or developed in the original book and movie. Why do you think the 7th Cavalry used a Rorschach mask?
Well, I think like we've already talked about, Rorschach represented a right-wing ideology that they were adopting, a very strict conservative point of view. And so, in the need to hide their identity and adopt a symbol that represented their thoughts and beliefs and anxieties and fears, I think they found the perfect flag almost in the Rorschach mask.
I was considering more... Okay, please forgive me because I'm about to invoke a really bad movie. In Iron Man 3, we see that the faux Mandarin has a Captain America tattoo. And Shane Black was asked, why would you do that? Why does Mandarin have that? And Shane Black said, Shane Black says, essentially, that figures like the Mandarin thrive on corrupting other symbols and twisting them to their design. They will manipulate the message of that symbol and work it to represent them. Almost a callback to the swastika and how it was manipulated into what it is now.
Sure.
We all know the swastika did not start off as a symbol of evil.
Many people don't know that, but yes, that is correct.
Oh, I know a lot of people don't know that. And side note to all the morons out there, we're not reclaiming it. Stop trying.
However, I am reclaiming the word fine. Fine is a perfectly acceptable way of describing something that is just average. But apparently every time I use the word fine, I get yelled at by my wife and everybody else. So I'm taking it back. In 2020, I am saying everything is fine, except for The Watchmen, which was superior.
I'll go watch Clerks 2.
Nope.
You get the reference, though, right?
I got the reference, yes. So taking it back.
Okay, good, because I am not saying the word there. I am not getting us booted off Spreaker. No, but to me, I feel that was what they were doing.
Okay.
Rorschach's theme of his mask was that to him the world was black and white. There was no gray area. You were either a good person or you were a bad person. And to the 7th Cavalry, I feel that they took that message, that there is the good, there is the bad, there is the white, and there is the black, and there is no mixing, and they corrupted that to their message.
You might be right. I'd have to go back and reread Watchmen. Kind of, Rorschach is a lot of, by virtue of what Alan Moore was going for. He's got that noir going for him. That sort of detective noir thing, and I'd have to go back and see kind of like what specifically he's saying in the book to where, well, is it that he's kind of got a far right conservative? I mean, because I was just reading in one of the Wikipedia pages I was looking at while we were talking about the show, something about Rorschach being a racist, but I honestly don't remember. It's been a while since I've read the book, so I'd have to go back and look at it. Certainly that's not other people's interpretation of that character. They see him as sort of a righteous symbol of justice.
For the record, I love Rorschach as a character, and I think that Jackie Earle Haley, who played him in the film, is one of the most criminally underrated actors of the last 10 years.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I'm sorry. You can say what you want about the Nightmare on Elm Street remake, and believe me, I have. And I will agree that no one could ever replace Robert Englund, but goddamn, Jackie Earle Haley came pretty freaking close.
So Jesse cut it from our Doomsday Clock discussion, but I had pitched the idea of Rorschach and The Question need their own series, and the cover of the book needs to just be Rorschach flashing the question and the question flashing Rorschach, and both of them nodding approvingly.
You realize that book would pretty much be nothing but grumble, 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 back and forth.
So would the reviews of it, but that's not the point here.
Sorry.
With that said, I think we have reached the conclusion of this discussion. Anything else you want to add, or we'll just jump right into plugs?
The show's available on Amazon Prime for those who don't have HBO available. Go check it out. Again, the first few episodes, it's going to take a little bit to get through them. But, if you're willing to sit through the first few episodes of The Witcher, then there's no excuse.
There are certainly worse shows you could be watching. Watchmen is worth the trip. I don't know how many people who are listening to this haven't seen the show. Well, we've spoiled the fuck out of it, but if that's the case. But if you should be one of those weirdos who listened to this, didn't mind being spoiled, I hope we've convinced you to watch the show. It really is worth your time. With that said, tell them, you make jewelry and sell it to people on the street and in places and in rooms and whatnot. Tell them all about it.
I make jewelry and sell it in rooms?
Yes. Large convention halls.
I guess that's a room. Sorry, folks. Sometimes Mark just starts prattling, and I don't really know where to go from there. He does the Alan Moore thing, I guess. Yes, Honeysuckle Rose Creations, the intersection of geek and chic. Right now, we're in our down season. We're not going to start our conventions again until the spring when we head to Planet Comic-Con in Kansas City. But we're doing a lot of work right now. For lack of better terms, this is also the time period where we start doing our data analytics, and I start going, so what do I need to look for trends? But of course, you can always find our new stuff online. You can find our stores on Etsy and Handmade at Amazon. We are on Facebook, Instagram, and like I said earlier, under protest, Twitter. And we are currently working with a handful of shops in Missouri and Kansas to try to get our stuff sold in actual physical stores for those who want to just check them out in person. Right now, our items are available in Kansas City in the Level 1 game shop in the Pawn and Pint. Actually, I don't really know what you call Pawn and Pint. It's one of those places where you can get a beer and play a board game. There's a name for it, but I can't think of exactly what it's called.
So if you enjoyed Alexis on the show tonight and you want to hear her back on more of these TV parties, she'll be on next week to talk The Mandalorian. Also, the CW... Are you coming on the CW Crisis on Infinite Earths? No, I don't have you listed on that one.
I'm not sure at the moment. Depends on whether or not I've got time. I hate to say it. Everyone's telling me I need to start watching Dracula on Netflix.
Fair
I
enough.
was going to ask you if you want to throw that into the schedule if you're feeling up for it.
We'll see. I have thought about it, but I don't want to get into the schedule right now. Anyway, she's definitely back for The Mandalorian, and then she'll be back again in February for a TV party for the original WBCW, whatever the hell it was, whatever network it initially aired on, the one and only season of Birds of Prey. And we'll be doing that the same week of the Birds of Prey movie. She'll be back to do Damn You Hollywood for Sonic the Hedgehog. Are you coming on the Damn You Hollywood for the Birds of Prey movie?
Yeah, you might as well have the only female who will talk to you guys actually talk about this.
And then finally, because you're the person I can go to for animated stuff, and I am curious about this. It's been out for a little while now. We're not going to get to it to the end of February, but that's all right. Green Eggs and Ham, the show on Netflix. We're actually going to talk about that at the end of February, so that'll be fun.
I consider myself a bit of an authoritarian on Dr. Seuss. I am looking forward to that.
I should regale you with my reading of Green Eggs and Ham that I read to my children until they told me to stop because I was scaring the shit out of them.
I used to scare my friends by telling the Zacks from verbatim.
In the meantime, you check out our review of Doomsday Clock leading up to tonight's TV party for Watchmen. Pat and I did a Chapter 3 of our long, strange trip through heavyweight boxing on Joe Louis. Sean and I did an on trial for Fight Club. Pat and I reviewed Fuller House Season 5, Part 1, You Bastards.
Me that a man who does nothing but bitch and complain actually wanted to sit through Fuller House.
He pitched the idea to me. He came to me with that one because he's totally 80s Pat Mullen. And then finally, myself and Jesse Starcher, speaking of incels and people who misinterpret other people's work, talked about Fight Club 2 on source material. I'm not going to tell you what else we're doing in the future because I got to cancel like half my shows when I do that. So, fuck it. My plugs are all stuff I've already done. That way I know they exist.
You got me recording this Thursday, too, for source material.
Yeah, but we're not supposed to tell people that.
We're not?
No, because that we record those things, we put them in a can, we edit them, and then we release them later. Time travel.
Okay, fine. Go jump in the TARDIS.
Man.
Oh, I'm sorry. Would you prefer I say go jump in the phone booth or the DeLorean?
DeLorean, thank you very much. I almost said I'm going to jump in the Mandalorian, but that would be gross. All right.
I was gonna say, yeah, pick it. You've got a time turner necklace. We got the Wayback Machine over there in the corner.
I call the Wayback Machine.
I need to draw a picture of like a giant garage sale with all the time travel machines available.
If you do, put it on a T-shirt, Mindy. All right.
What did you just call me?
Jesse's wife.
Oh.
Jesse's wife's name is Mindy. It's
know that.
It's a running gag. All right. Speaking of running gags, thank you, Alexis, for coming on TV Party tonight. This has been a Radulich and Broadcasting podcast. Be well, be safe, and behave.